I hope
Hello.
translation will work.
I hope so. Thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to add a few words to the introduction of Professor Malik. I was fascinated reading the website to see the extraordinary range of expertise along your career, encompassing economics, systems theory, cybernetics, information theory, logic, and the philosophy of science. And of course, what fascinated me the most was communication, adding into the mix. I have a few questions, particularly looking at a more organizational perspective. Professor Malik, we're continuously hearing experts telling all of us about the technological revolution that is disrupting our current way of working, living, relating to each other, and organizing. And you've consistently insisted that the 21st century is different from the 20th century. So for you, what changes will impact work the most and social institutions in particular?
Thank you for this question, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having invited me. And I'm very, very grateful for all these wonderful lectures, which I have learned a lot now. This few hours I have the pleasure to be here and the honor. So there should be a presentation, just 3 slides, how I see the great transformation, as I have been calling this phenomenon for 20 years now and even longer. Can somebody show these S-curves? Because it is not just disruption, as many people are saying. There is a regularity in it. It is a process which has a pattern, and this pattern has been repeated for quite some time already. There are 3, and this is now the 4th, great transformations. It's a little bit small, but maybe you can recognize it. Should I serve it, or does somebody else? Or shall I go there? No. Thank you very much. So you see a red curve. Colors don't have any political meaning. Just for, yeah, one could suspect it, but it is just for distinction. In a way, it fits. Whatever growth, and whatever growth soundly, healthily, does not grow linearly, but in S-shaped curves. And nothing lasts forever. We have an exponential phase in it, and we have 2 flattened. And then somewhere another curve comes in and substitutes the first one. So one curve kills the other. It is creative destruction, as the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter called it in the 1940s, and 3 of them are quite well researched, and I would like you to recommend, if you have to run an organization, whatever it is, from business to hospitals, from politics to whatever it is, please do yourself the favor to study history in these realms, in these fields. The first one happened in the 13th century, and what he brought up, just to give one example, was the Gothic cathedral, just out of the blue, basically, and many other things. The other one was in the 16th century, the Reformation, of course. And there is one phenomenon, because Columbus, one of the heroes of those days, in all his life did not recognize what he really did achieve. Because until his death, he thought he has landed in India. And another person who had never put the foot on the continent, Amerigo Vespucci, he was a servant of the Medici house, recognized this is not India. This is something totally new. It's a new continent, and therefore the continent was named according to him. And then it is, of course, the 18th century, the Industrial Revolution. Now, so good so far. It pays to study it. We have a critical decision zone here. Everybody talks about disruption. Yeah, it is difficult, but it's not really disruptive. We have a pattern. We can learn from it. Where are we now? I don't know. But I put the vertical line here. Could be a little bit more to the left, most probably, not more to the right. I think the larger part is still coming. But now, the real situation is not what I have been showing, but it's this one. We cannot look into the future. We can study history and the relevant patterns. But now we are here. And why do I show this and delve a little bit into it? If I am a business person, a hospital director, whatever, I'm on the red curve. This is what I have learned at the university. This is my experience. These are my successes, everything. The kind of management which has made us very successful, as you see. And at this very point in time, all our control systems, from the balance sheet to the forecasts we are doing, leads us astray. We are systematically led into the wrong direction. Because here, everything says to me, and of course the board of directors is happy with it, etc. Revenue is still rising, we are successful, not so much growth as last year, but still very okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, young man. It's all okay. We will boost marketing, of course. We have all these tools. Go ahead. And there is a green curve, they say. Well, somewhere in the United States, way back in the Rocky Mountains, they are doing something with computers. But look, it is very, very expensive, first of all. And second, please remember or take into account, for every successful Google or Apple or whatever we have, you have at least 1,000 failures. This is evolution. And this is never reported on in the media. They talk about Google, Apple, etc., but not about the evolutionary costs in terms of failure. So when future creeps in, little by little, at this cross point where the question mark is, we know what we should have done earlier on in order to be still in business. So this is basically the pattern I would like to recommend to you, to hang it on your windows, wherever you, computer screens, etc., in order to make people never forget this pattern. And there are some consequences on it.
I'll put it under my mouse as a mouse pad to remind me.
Mousepad is very well, a screensaver is very well. There is one particular point, location in any organization which it has the best effect.
Fantastic.
It's up to you to guess.
You've also argued that in order to make this sort of shift, this transformation, we all need to have a profound understanding of complexity. And to achieve this, we're going to need complexity to transform social organizations. So how can social organizations, social institutions become more flexible, more responsive, more creative, more able to evolve and learn in order to manage
These are the difficult challenges to meet. It is the substitution of the old world, which we have been knowing very well, by a new world which we not are familiar with. So we can basically only guess, but we can learn from history, as I told. And there are driving forces. It's first of all, we mentioned it already, the digitization, of course. This comes first. But the second one is ecology. I think one can take it serious, climate problems, etc. Even if that would not be true, there are still scientists who claim that, but it causes political upheavals and a lot of disturbances and changes. Then there is the economy with a lot of debt. You see, we are loaded with debt all over the world, and nobody knows so far how we will deal with that. And then we have also digitization, economy, ecology, and these add up to what I call complexity.
Yes.
If they come together, these are the driving forces. Let me just point to one thing which in my opinion, is important. Digitization is an old thing. See, in 1974, the last analog computer has been put idle. So we have been very long with digitization. But what it does at this level of technology, of storage, of speed, etc., that is new. And this is interconnectivity. So basically what goes on, in my opinion, is we will interconnect everything with everything else globally. And this then will be the sort of end of digitization. Everything to everything else globally. And there are two laws which have to be known, in my opinion. What does the interconnectivity do? Interconnectivity is the principle of evolution. And it creates new things by the second, basically. Whenever things come together, which were separated before, if they come together in the right way, something innovative happens. I give some example. And whenever we can do simultaneously what we have to be, what we could do only up to date by lack of methods, etc., and technology, sequentially, and we can now do simultaneously, the same happens. Just two examples. If we put together hydrogen and oxygen, it gives water. We know that. So we cannot drink hydrogen, neither oxygen. We cannot cook meals. We cannot do the laundry, but we can do it with water. Totally new. I mean, it's primitive, you see. It's primary school knowledge. But people don't pay attention to that. Why is this so? If you do it wrongly, it gives a self-destructing substance. I don't know the English expressions, Knallgas in German. It destroys itself if you do it wrongly. The other thing is, many of you may like classical music, symphony. We can play a symphony in two ways, Beethoven or Mozart or whatever you like best. We can do it sequentially, the first violins, second violins, third violins, the cello, the flute, the oboe, the clarinet, and so on, and so on, and so on. Then the music lasts for 1 week. You need logistics, you need toilets. Wonderful sequence. Every note brilliantly played by the Berlin or Vienna Philharmonics on the best level, but it's not a symphony. It is a sequential, whatever I will call it. I don't know to have a name. Now somebody has the crazy idea and says, let them play all together. That's not possible, you see. This is technically not possible. We know it is, and it needs some very little things. And then you get the symphony. You cannot describe it in words, but you will never forget it. See? Something totally different. This is, instead of sequentially, doing it simultaneously, interconnect all these things. This is the trick of nature, and this brings about evolution. And this is what we will experience in the next, let me say, 2 decades, 3 decades, may last a little bit longer. 150 years probably, until it ends.
Absolutely. In line with that statement, what happens to social institutions that refuse to take the green line? What happens if we decide to keep going along the red curve and we keep using our current management style to organize these institutions?
Those who refuse intentionally will die out. There is no way of solving that problem. But most of the institutions and their executives today say, well, of course, we have to change. We have to change a lot. There is big change. There is all sorts of transformational change, etc., etc. Yes, it's true. They talk about it in many cases without recognizing what they are talking about. Like Columbus. He has discovered something, of course, but he thought it was India. It was not. It was not something totally new, which did not exist in his mind. So think of the terrestrial picture of the solar system and the solar. It's comparable to that also. So what is more dangerous is the question, or more demanding is the question, how do we recognize what really goes on? Because the new things don't have names. See? We do not know how to call the new world for lack of concepts. People, when the automobile was invented, they had no better word than automobile. Hey, that's not very marketing-like. That's not very sexy, isn't it? A thing which drives by itself. Yes, it did so. But there could have been today, with marketing people, a much better denomination of it. Now, what do I want to say with that? There is a lot of digitization. There is a lot of things going on, a lot of innovation. But do you know what happens in about 60% of cases, and I know that from empirical research, which I have been doing for quite a while, we are about to digitalize the old world red curve processes. Then you have a wonderfully digitalized process, which is shitty old. You have done the worst you could do. Instead of asking the question, now that we have digitization, how we could our organization now build totally a new, totally different. So, of course, the Googles and the Apples are, but it's very difficult for the automobile companies, for the suppliers of the automobile companies, for the steel industry, for whatever you have, the chemicals, and I mean, this still amounts for the large part of the... But there are examples. So, for instance, the Chinese can build within 4 years a totally new kind of airport, which works in Berlin, Germany. I may say so because my wife is German. They are not able to build a much smaller new airport within 10 years. And maybe they put it idle, I do not know, because it's totally old.
Absolutely.
Also, this is totally new. You see that.
Absolutely. Coming back to the idea of the specificity of social institutions, it's very interesting to see, particularly in Europe, the growth of fourth sector organizations where you get businesses, enterprises, non-profit organizations and governments coming together to offer very innovative social services in a range of different contexts. It seems that managers, workers in general are very interested in changing structures, seeing the world in new and innovative ways, even changing practices. But to go back to a point that Ignacio made this morning in his opening presentation, how can complexity science help us to understand not just the transformation of the institutional structures in themselves, but what this is actually going to mean for the human person? Is this transformation going to change what it means to relate, what it means to be human, and what we might be to each other? That's a big question.
That's a big one, yes. Okay, first of all, my recommendation is most people reflectively, instinctively shy away from complexity. They don't like the word, it's complex. Let's reduce it. That's the first impulse. That is a very good strategy in case that people do not really mean complexity, as it has been represented here, very wonderfully, thank you so much, but they mean actually complicatedness. But that's something totally different. So bureaucracy is a wonderful example for complicatedness, but not for complexity. And what people try is the system really is complex. If you try to establish a political coalition, for instance, like in Germany, and then you have endless nights of negotiations, and it very rarely works. Because people use the old methods. It's the old meeting formats, it's the old conference formats. See, so My recommendation is use complexity. Complexity is the raw material, the most precious raw material of the 21st century. It is much more precious than every rare metals because it is the source of intelligence, and we can amplify that. It is the source of innovation, of creativity, of everything which goes on in evolution. Now, what does it mean for the organizations? One step is to start to innervate the organizations. If you look at an organization chart, I interpret the boxes, wonderfully designed, as the anatomy of a person, of an organism. Heart, lung, skeleton, liver, etc., etc. Might be an analogy. And then we have the little drawings between it, and we have the process diagrams. That's the physiology, digestion, respiration, etc., etc. But in more than 40 years of experience in educating executives and consulting to them, etc., I have never seen an analogon to the nervous system. It's just not there. Now one says, well, we executives, we are the nervous system. By and large, I can live with that unless such a transformation happens. No, we really need to use brain knowledge, and some pieces have been wonderfully shown here, in order to innervate actually the organizations with digitization, of course. And there is a construction of what we call this viable system, which is a rebuild of the human nervous system. Not into the micro levels, that's not necessary for organizations, and this will be the next step to really make these organizations function. And there is an identity almost, what computers need to work to function are operating systems. You all know that. What we are doing in management is applying the same knowledge to organizations by making organizations function. So it's operating systems for organizations, and not just for business organizations, but for all kinds of organizations.
Absolutely. You just mentioned that you've been teaching managers for decades. This is an extremely important contribution, as well as the research, the 15 books, the more than 300 publications. We have to check when you sleep. But I was wondering, how are we going to prepare not just managers, but other organizational members, all organizational members? We talk a lot about big data, and we're living in an era of big data, but maybe we should be calling it an era of big change. And all the research indicates that top-down change management is problematic. All of us who've tried to implement change know this. So I might be not having a job or ending up volunteering if I'm not training high-level people, managers. I might be out of a job. But should we be expanding complexity to all organizational members rather than just leaving it in the hands of those at the top? And how might we do that?
Yes, yes, absolutely right. Thank you for that question. Yes, it includes all kinds of organizations. So the business organization, in a way, is sort of a pioneer because they have more money than the other ones. See, that's one reason. And of course, it's also interesting, and they need that, and they take it, and whether they love it depends on the people. By the way, we do not call about teaching them. They don't like that. We call about enabling them, supporting
empowering
them, things like that. Yes, this is sort of it eases these things for them. But for instance, hospitals are much more complex than most businesses, for instance, yes, or political organizations, or cities, for instance, as organizations. We had to research how many organizations actually do exist in a developed country. There are no statistics. We found out roughly by thumb-piling about 4% of the population, 4 to 5% of the population of a developed country. So Germany, 80 million inhabitants, people has about 4 million organizations. That's enormous, you see. And practically every person lives her or his lives within an organization, trying to get something fruitful, something which is successful, and nobody has been ever educated to work in an organization and to become effective. That is a very lamentable situation. We should start in primary school, teaching our children what it means to become effective in an organization. They have no experience about organizations. So that's one point. The other point is technology helps us. So the classical presence seminar, that runs out. It's no longer effective enough. So we have to use, of course, technology.
So what would you encourage business schools in particular to be using to empower, to enhance organizational members' ability to deal with this new environment?
Part of the business schools is doing research, which is very valuable. And of course also teaching students, which is also valuable up to a degree, but the big question is where do they get practical experience? Right. This is, for the colleagues, it's not an easy thing to do, besides research and teaching, etc., and it's not easy to handle for the students themselves. So there should be some innovation, and in some cases it is. It is already so. This is very important. To get experience with the boss before you are 16, that would be recommendable. And then it is very recommendable to have experience with a very bad boss and 2 good ones. You will learn from all 3 very much, so this would help you then to select the right kinds of books and lectures and so on and so forth. There will be a lot of challenges for all of us in the business schools. Yes.
Absolutely. Thinking more broadly, just at the organizational level, you've talked a lot about what workers need to do, what managers could do, what institutions, organizations that form managers might do. I was thinking also about social institutions need to have quite a clear identity, a social mission, what their purpose in the world is. However, you've argued that as well as being able to become a learning organization, to be flexible, to evolve, identities are also going to become more fluid and change, maybe constantly. How can a social institution know what it's aiming for, what its purpose is, at the same time that it needs to change perhaps that core purpose?
Besides studying these things and really day and night dreaming about it, working on it, etc., one cannot overdo it at these times, but one has to start with the purpose, with a clear idea, and this is not easy to do. What is the purpose of this organization, and what could it be, and what should it be? And in business, we had an enormous way behind us now of a wrong direction. This is the shareholder value, the idea that the purpose of a business is to make money. A lot of economists see it that way, and a lot of business persons also. Of course, it needs money, it needs profits, but as my old passed away friend Peter Drucker said in 1956, made another suggestion: the purpose of a business is to create a customer, a satisfied customer. And so what kind of customer? And in the social organizations, it is even more difficult to find out, to think really through. It goes up to quite demanding philosophical questions. What is our purpose? What should it be? Without that, it's dangerous terrain. But if one has found a statement for it, that's the first step. The second one is to carve out an organizational or business mission. And this is not just a good slogan. You see, most missions are marketing slogans, and okay, one needs them too, but it is much more to it. What is really needed out there? What does the society really need? And what could we deliver? And where are we really stronger than others? Both belong together. And the third one is, what do we believe in? What are our deepest beliefs which helps us, which enables us to go on, even if motivation is already used up? If you are so and so long, for months and probably years, in a crisis modus, where almost nothing functions but you have to go on, in hospitals, in politics, wherever it is, then you need something in which you can believe. And these are values, which again serve the purpose. And so you have a closed circle. And if one does that, one should go on continuously. And many executives shy away in all kinds of organizations, sort of philosophically, but it pays to do so. And to involve also a lot of people. And for that, one can recommend other formats of meeting and exchanging and doing conversations, communications, than just the small team. The small team is no longer strong enough for challenges like we have them. So there are such methods.
Okay, thank you. Another idea that I had, which is very interesting in your books, you talk a lot about the self-organizing organization. Could you briefly speak to us about that?
Yeah, that's the kernel of cybernetics. I mean, many people talk about systems, so do we, but systems thinking is not enough, because whenever I talk, I have legitimation to talk about the system, because there is some ordered whole, there is some cybernetics in it. And cybernetics is the science of regulation and self-regulation, yes. Organization and self-organization. And in particular, I am stressing the self in it, enabling organizations to self-organize. And this is one of the maxims: organize a system so as to make it self-organizing. Now, cybernetics, it has not been used many times this morning, but I would like to recommend it. Cybernetics has been invented in the late 40s. Norbert Wiener, the great mathematician, wrote a book on cybernetics. A lot of Turing was not member, but they inherited what he did. And Heinz von Förster, for instance, and Gregory Bateson, you have shown, was partly a member of that in that time, one of the geniuses. Heinz von Förster, I said already. Then the information, there's a lot of these great persons. When the computer has been invented, and the subtitle to me was always important: Cybernetics, Communication and Control in the Animal and the Machine. Communication and control in the animal and the machine. And thereby he destroyed the divide of the old Greeks between a non-living world and a living world. In the animal and the machine. The communication rules and the rules of control, and this means self-organization and self-regulation, are exactly the same. And so it pays to study this. And by the way, cybernetics is the science, or the practice, let me put it like that, to be successful without knowing causalities. And our friends from the mathematical side have mentioned how difficult it is to, in real complexity, to detect and to discover causality. It is there, but it's huge. It is nowhere and everywhere. But do we really need it? Actually not, because the Kybernetes in Greek is the steersman. It's not the captain, but the steersman. And the Kybernetes in the boat does not know, and he needs not know for what causes the wind has changed, or the stream of the water. He does not know, but he has a trick. He adjusts the sail, he adjusts the rudder, and the boat is on course again. Think of that. That's the first time that we have knowledge which enables us and practices to do the right things without knowing the causes of the changes. I think that's quite an interesting breakthrough. And therefore, I would recommend to study cybernetics. It's one of the fascinating things. Evolution runs on cybernetics. And by the way, do we have a little bit time?
Yes,
because I would give you one example where everybody of us, man and woman, is totally brilliant cyberneticists. Please guess. Nobody? Yes, when we are for the first time in life searching for a partner. Then we have all the tricks on it, at least the men, but the women too, of how to come together or to avoid each other or what to do. So we are so attentive to that situation that cybernetics poor. Women claim and complain about men losing that capacity after marriage. I do not know whether it's true or not, but one hears that rumor. So I hope you understood it. We look at every little signal, at every little vibration. Okay? And then there are other examples too. So one example for very cyberneticized organizations, that's the control of the international air traffic. Works perfectly well. We have about 150,000 flights per day, 150,000 flight movements per day around the world, day and night, not counted military aircraft, and nothing happens. Under all weather conditions, under all other kinds of conditions, practically nothing happens. Why it is so? Because cybernetics is governing that system by simple communication rules. People think then, if we talk to each other, that we are communicating. Actually, we are not. Communication takes place only when we have two levels, namely what we want to convey to each other, and the other level is how to make sure that the other person has understood the message, vice versa. And Gregory Bateson called it double loop closure of the system with feedback. So we could make a little experiment with how many cyberneticians are here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Malik, for these insights. And thanks for sharing with us today.
Thank you for your very nice questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This belongs here. So.
Thank you so much.